PaperBag series. I am with your co-host, Mr. Kola Adetola.
Thank you. I'm here with your host, Mr. Brandon Lewis.
Greetings and welcome to the Brown PaperBag series. I am with your co-host, Mr. Kola Adetola.
Thank you. I'm here with your host, Mr. Brandon Lewis.
And today we have music critic, cultural commentator, and columnist for the Daily Beast, Mr. Todd Stereo Williams.
And we have my man, CEO of 180 Entertainment, Mr. Felipe King Nady. So let's see what's in the bag. My man Phil.
Phil's going.
My man Phil, do the honors.
Thanks. Birth.
Bird. That's a good word.
Okay.
That's a good
All
word.
right,
Boy.
really good. So you're going to speak first, Phil.
Birth represents life, represents a new beginning. Babies, I'm a daddy myself. It's the best gift in the world that you could receive. And that's the start of a new beginning and a new journey. It's a good word. Good word to start with in the bag.
Yeah,
What about you, Tom?
it's a beginning. It's a beginning. It's also kind of a transition. I mean, it's not like you were nothing and then you were born. There was something that existed before birth. So it's kind of like, it's a metamorphosis on a certain level. If you think that things are infinite, it's a part of a circle. But it is definitely the beginning of something. You have to have a starting point.
That's nice.
So both of you have made me think about sort of the idea of existentialism, like what is real and things like that, and the idea of birth, new possibilities, new journeys. I could say that of having two girls of my own, Kaya and Sarah, and watching it, and having your own ideas about, sort of life and what you want them to be, but with them you're it's a conflict, because what ends up happening is personalities, dispositions, characteristics, individuality comes into play, and you see that with your ideas from birth until what they're going to be, it changes because they have their own lives and they have their own journey. And so it's something it's a process, and you watch it, and really quite honestly, when you watch birth and you experience it, and for those that haven't seen it, you've seen it in maybe if you're older, if you're my generation, and I'm 38, you've seen it in one form or another. The idea that just life takes place and grows from that.
It's life-changing.
It's life-changing for you, and just watching that experience, it's a learning sort of thing, and we're constantly, I think, in the state of trying to understand more about it. We're trying to understand where things are going and the whole thing. So it's great.
And I'm gonna speak on a different dynamic from the perspective in which y'all approach the word birth from. I had a conversation the other day with one of my cousins who's also I think she's 19 or 20, and we were saying how it's weird to see our fellow classmates and friends who are we still see them as children. We grew up with them. So when they have kids and start getting married, for us we're like, yo, you really did that. And then when you're speaking to your friends, you're like, yo, I really did that. That's a little me. Yeah. But we're trying to figure out why is it so weird that we feel that way about it. Compared to once you get mature and you're older, when you have kids, it's a part of the process that you kind of already had in the back of your mind. For us, we're it looks like kids having kids.
Right.
And so we're it's really because we still view them as kids.
Right.
So when they have kids, it creates that whole little weird dynamic of why we feel like that. And I just wanted to express as a thought.
That's a whole conversation, Kola Adetola, and I absolutely
It's kind of like this unsaid, you're not a kid anymore. Once you have a kid, you gave up your kid card.
And a lot of people feel that you don't fully become an adult until you become a parent. Now, I don't necessarily share that perspective, but a lot of people feel that way, and culturally you see we behave that way in a lot of ways. Becoming a parent kind of affirms you as an adult in the eyes of our society.
Yeah.
From my take, birth is understanding, and it's a lifelong mission, and you see it, and whether it's in your experience
or others,
or watching others or whatever, it's constant.
It's that cycle,
it's
a constant transition. It's not a clear beginning and end. It seems like it.
Yeah.
But what seems like a beginning is really when that baby comes out, that's the end of a 9-month period. You know what I mean? It's the culmination of something.
9
too.
or before.
Yeah, you know, so it's like, and even that the sperm finding the egg is the culmination of something. So everything has a beginning and an end, even the beginning of something. So it's all perpetual, if that's the right word.
Stay tuned. That might actually be like a conversation.
whole nother conversation.
It'll be a conversation me and Dejan.
So I think we're gonna go. So thank you everyone for your thoughts and ideas regarding birth. And I think that all of us probably could have gone on because it started to get into a very interesting conversation. However, we have to move on.
So, can you kindly pass Mr. Todd the brown paper bag? Let's see what's in the bag.
Stereo Williams.
The one and only. Letting go.
Oh,
Letting
wow.
go.
Letting go.
That's a good word too.
Oh,
Two back-to-back good words.
And it's attached to birth sometimes.
Really,
To a certain
really.
thing.
Ooh.
So,
It's the same. It's the flip side of birth, you know, because what is death? You know, letting go of something. Like the person who's dying is letting go of life.
Yeah,
The
good
people
point.
that are losing that person, they're letting go of a person that they love. The question is, why is letting go typically framed as a painful thing when we do it all the time?
Yeah.
We do it all the time. Every part of your life, you're letting go of something. When you go from high school to college, you let go of that. You had to walk away from it. Sometimes I wonder that our contemporary society suffers because we're almost grooming ourselves to not let go of things. Nostalgia is like huge right now, and it's always been there, but it's very big right now. And we seem to want to cling to things in a way. Think about Facebook and social media. Years ago, after high school, you didn't see your friends anymore, and you know, and that may sound like a tragedy to some people, but that was just life. You know, you moved on and you let go. The people that were meant to stay in your life stayed in your life. Now we have all these means to keep people in your life forever, regardless. And sometimes I think it's crippling us in our capacity to let go.
Indeed. My man Phil.
That was amazing. Wow. Letting go. That's actually something that I've struggled with
Yeah.
my entire life up until recently. I've learned to let go. I used to question, why aren't these certain people in my life anymore? Why did these certain people cut me off? Why didn't this relationship work? Why didn't this job work out that I really loved? Like, I would ponder almost into, you know, like a stressed position emotionally and mentally on trying to figure out why things were and not letting go. And once I learned how to let go, I felt a lot better. You know, it takes a weight off. Learning to forgive yourself, forgiving others, and looking towards the future. So letting go is really important.
I agree 100%. I'm actually going to piggyback off what you said because that's 100% what came into my mindset when the word came out the bag. I feel like letting go has a negative connotation tied to it. And until that negativity is removed from how people view letting go, it may remain a negative thing. Only in the way that our society paints that. I feel like letting go is a process. And like Phil said, once you engage in that process, you see the rebuttal of the results. You see how you feel and how your life kind of revolves once you let go. Once you remove that negativity aspect, you see all the positive to it. And I just feel like there might be a day where everybody can truly let go, even though it might be a human nature thing where we can't.
Right.
But once we do achieve that, at least as an individual, you'll feel positive side effects.
So I would, say that everybody had a great depiction of this idea of letting go, and it's very sort of like, to a degree, it's a binary, it's a confrontation between like birth and this idea of letting go. And really, I would say that when you're looking at the beginning to the end, the alpha, the omega, whatever it may be, you know what I mean, like the idea of like life, you see certain things from birth, and as you get older, there's certain things that you let go of, there's certain things that you don't, there's certain things that you like form like who you are.
Right.
from the idea of like letting go. You know what I mean? Like
Or
I'm
not.
gonna move beyond this. I'm gonna
Right.
stay with this, and these, you know, it's really, it's a complex issue. Both these topics are really complex. But I'll say that at the end of the day, like I had a really good friend that's passed away recently, frat brother Gamma Zeta, you know, Elliot Mizell, and like it's like this idea. I'm not letting go of him. I'm taking like certain ideas that I've learned from him, the experiences that we've had together, and the interactions, and he's carried with me. So I'm not really letting go of that. However, if it's a habit, something habitual that I don't need in my life, I might let go of that to make me better. You know, so I think that the overall idea from birth and the idea of letting go, it's a process, and you learn what's not needed with until, you know what I mean, I guess you're in, and it's a constant thing that where you're constantly questioning of the things that you should let go. I don't know.
Everything you just said,
it's interesting.
the word freedom came to mind.
Yeah.
Based off of what you said, that's what I got. Like, it gives you freedom to
Yeah.
let this person go, but in a positive way. Like,
Remember what I was
like
saying?
Carlos
Yeah.
just said,
Once you
it doesn't
receive
have
that.
to be
Right.
a negative
Right.
thing.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Or you could, it's like raising an anchor.
Right.
A relief.
You know?
A lot
Relief.
of times,
Relief,
like, going
yeah.
back to death, you know, because I connected letting go to death when I saw it. Not necessarily, you know, in a morbid way, but just
In general.
You lose a friend. In general, you lose a friend. Part of the more destructive way to grieve, or the more negative way to grieve, is to cling to that and not be able to face the fact that they're gone. But I think that it's a healthier thing to accept that they're gone and still hold on to even the sentimentality of the positive memories, the lessons that you learn. Like it's a balance, you know. Like it can be negative in a certain context, but it's not inherently negative the way a lot of people treat it.
That's another topic I feel we'll talk on
Absolutely.
for a while.
So with that, thank you both for allowing us to engage in those conversations. And now we're going to move into like sort of like just some ideas that the two of you have, because I think, well, at least myself, I'm really excited to hear what the two of you say. So we're going to begin with our first question.
So, first question. Welcome to season 2. First of all, it's an honor and a pleasure to be in the midst of two great scholars and smart individuals as yourself. My first question.
Likewise.
My first, thank you. That's respect. My first question is to Mr. Todd. Off of the titles and edification that Brandon gave you, you hear so many different things, so many different areas of things that you do. I engage in a lot of different areas myself, but I'm intrigued by yours, and I would like to ask you the question of what exactly would you tell someone who doesn't know you and who meets you for the first time and ask you a simple question of who are you and what do you do?
I am a writer who is passionate in the celebration and examination of popular art. More than anything.
That's dope. I like that breakdown.
That's more than anything. That's what I do, and that's what I strive to do. I think that we can trivialize popular art. It's entertainment. You know what I mean? It's hard to look at something like a $1 billion movie like Transformers and see it as something deeper than just a $1 billion movie with, you know, robots beating each other up. And it's not much more than that. But that doesn't mean that there aren't popular films, popular albums, popular books, popular television shows that reflect and affect our culture. And I always make the point, I'm from a small town where the arts aren't really celebrated as thoroughly as they could be in, you know, maybe a big city. And sometimes people look at the arts or going into entertainment as like a pipe dream, or like, why are you being impractical? Or as something trivial, like something that shouldn't even be treated as anything more than mindless entertainment, something to consume or to occupy your time. But I always tell people, when you think about it, we teach kids Shakespeare for a reason. You know what I mean? We teach kids poetry and filmmakers, and we teach them books. And today there are people who can quote Shakespeare easier than they can quote King George. You know what I mean?
That's true.
And Gerard Carmichael made a joke, and it turned some people off, but there's a ring of truth to it when he said, you know, I can quote Jay-Z more than I can quote Martin Luther King. You know, like,
Facts.
it's an uncomfortable laugh, but that's a real thing, you know. So I take that seriously, and I try to push that forward in my writing and my dialogue and everything I do.
So I say, as a music critic and a columnist for the Daily Beast, and just really, quite honestly, I've known you since 1997.
Right.
You know, for a very long time.
Sheesh.
For Valley State University. You know, I always got to give the fuck. So, I would ask you, like, when you're thinking about sort of like your lens, like where you're coming from, being a music critic and cultural commentator, how do you take sort of like where you are and your position as a writer and sort of like frame that into sort of like critiquing where we are today in terms of music?
It's all, for me, it's all the way I see it from jump. Like, going back to what I said earlier, art and entertainment reflect us. We talk a lot about how it affects us. We talk about the influence of television on kids. We talk about music lyrics and how it may shape attitudes about this, that, and the third. We should be talking as much about how much that, why we are creating this art. Why is this art being created now? What does it say about us that we are creating this art? What does it say about us that this art is resonating with us? You couldn't drop The Chronic in 1955. You know, as great as that album is, we like to think music is universal and timeless and all those things, but music is a product of that era, you know, that environment.
Life imitates art. Yeah,
Life imitates art, basically, yeah, life imitates art. And so, going back to your question, it's all, for me, it's all intrinsically connected. To me, if you're in any way trying to examine pop culture, pop art in a thoughtful way, you have to look at it through that lens. It can't just be in a vacuum. Art doesn't exist in a vacuum. It all came from something. It's all connected to something. And it reflects our values. There's a reason why you could drop some of the most misogynistic lyrics of all time in the 1990s and people just kind of shrug them off. You know, a lot of those attitudes hadn't been examined yet. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think everything that we do is connected to culture. And so when I talk about it, I intentionally talk about it that way to remind us that it's all connected to culture. Because you can forget. Some people just don't think that deeply about whatever the hottest album is out right now, or whatever the big movie is right now. You know, some people never think about, if you go see Thor Ragnarok, you might not see the allusions to the prison industrial complex in that movie. You know what I mean? It might just be a big, you know, Nordic god fighting a big green guy. You know what I mean? Some people just, they
take it for what it is they see, the surface level.
And it's not necessarily that they're wrong. Yeah. It's just, you also need to have those other people that are saying, no, this is a reflection of something because this is a piece of pop art that reflects attitudes of 2017. How can it not? It's made in 2017 by people. You know, it's going to reflect what we think.
I agree completely. You have those artists who spotlight what's going on culturally in neighborhoods, right, or in specific areas, or with a specific age group or demographic. But I also feel like censorship had a large part why now it's more accepted to hear words and see images on the screen that we didn't see 20, 30 years, I can even say 10 years ago.
Even 10 years ago.
So I feel like it's not that it wasn't examined.
It was taboo.
That state of mind examined. I feel like a blanket was put over it.
Right.
It's a good way to
a lot of these mentalities and things that are being said and even ways of dressing has been there, but it has been shunned, quieted, put in the basement or the attic or banned at school, and now not so much.
So, Felipe Steez. Felipe King, you know, my boy for a very long time. You're talking about the idea that the blanket's been like put over it, you know what I'm saying? So now it's pulled off. You know, you have sort of like an open space for your creativity. And as an artist I've known for a very long time, you know, I would ask you, like, within the idea of art, where does it become difficult, particularly with like language? So like, let's think about it in the idea of like the uses of the word nigger. You know, Randall Kennedy wrote a book called Nigger. I think he wrote a book called Nigger, Randall Kennedy, and it was really interesting when I read it as a graduate student. Just made me think about like the historical sort of like side. But then I look at it like from an artistic side and all these different things, from like, you know, music, things that you couldn't do back then, you know, to where we are now. where do you sort of like see that within particular language that is used, particularly on that concept? Particularly on that concept, you can hear it's okay, it's acceptable because it's art, but then why can you use that word, but you can use it, but I can't, or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so what are your ideas and thoughts about that as you're creating your own sort of art and creativity as an artist and a musician?
All right. For a long time, I never used the word nigger in my writings.
Nigga? Did you use nigga?
No. I
Neither.
never used the N-word in my writings, ever. Because I wanted to show that you can describe another person, especially another man of color, without using the N-word. It had been used long enough. But then I started to realize that hip-hop had let out our secret, let out our little special behind-the-scene word that we used to describe each other, even though it was off limits to other cultures and other races. That was our little thing. Because we'll beat another race up, especially white people, if they use the word nigger. But hip-hop, groups like the Wu-Tang Clan, who are international, got over into Asia. And so you have Asian kids, you have groups like Cypress Hill, crossed over into Hispanics. They use it. So I feel like the word nigga, the B word, bitch, has become culturally accepted amongst the society as a whole. We are the millennials are least likely to beat up another race because they use the prefix nigga before a sentence. Because they're starting to realize Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, now Future, now all of these people that we look up to, Nicki Minaj says, bitch, everybody is yes, bitch, yes. Before, women will fight you.
For
Oh,
derogatory.
So real quick, earlier I listened to a song with Todd, Stereo Williams, and we were listening to NWA. What was that album?
Niggas for life.
Niggas for Life. And several times Eazy-E said, nigga, If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and check out Niggas for Life, and that's what it is. But you know what though, you brought up a really good concept, the idea of like insider, outsider roles. One thing that I tell my students all the time is that, if I'm a poor white person talking to another poor white person, I can call them, you poor white trash, or whatever. If I'm like a woman in certain spaces, not all, but in many. I talked to my students and many of them confirmed, about 98% of them, that they'll call each other like bitch. But it's like a thing to where it's like,
you share the same something.
There's a shared experience.
A shared experience. So like this whole idea is that if you're an insider with a particular thing and you understand the root of that word and the oppression that has caused you as a group, and you can identify with somebody else with that, then let's celebrate it and let's laugh at it, but let's, you know what I mean? It's very interesting, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because it's still touching. Kola, where do you think that happened, that change?
I was gonna follow up with a
Yeah,
question.
there you go.
I was gonna say, you mentioned that hip hop kind of like gave the secret out. You said you felt like that, right? So my question was gonna be, do you feel like hip hop is to blame for the secret getting out and it being misconstrued a whole different way?
I definitely think.
Do you think hip hop is to blame?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I think black people, especially hip hoppers, the hip hop culture, should not. I might get a lot of flack, but whatever. Should not beat up
Everyone for using it the way they use it.
everybody else for using something that we introduced and made it sound good and wanted you to buy into. Using the word nigga.
So to follow that though,
Because when I pointed to him, because all I can hear is nigga, nigga, nigga,
He said,
nigga,
"Duh-duh-duh-duh."
Since you know me, since everybody knows me, what do y'all know?
I remember you said you don't use the word no
I
more.
don't use
When I
around
met
me,
you,
things
you
like
just said that.
Yeah. So,
But to even emphasize in the same area of what you're speaking of, it's kind of like you give someone something that's not intended for them, and they don't know how to use it, so they use it however they feel like it.
True.
Can we blame people for using it and it ending up in a derogatory way?
That's a good question. I feel like it's just like a gun. It's just like a gun.
It'll do the harm if you.
You are responsible for using that weapon, and the N-word is definitely a weapon. You can either say, hey, check out my gun, my nigga, or you could say, hey, check out my gun, my nigga. It's about how you use it determines your outcome.
So let me come in and just say that it's a really interesting perspective, and I haven't heard you say that since many years that I've known you. And
I bring that out of some people sometimes.
yeah, you do.
I like to thank God.
So it's a
and,
great question and interesting retort. I can't. Yeah. We'll say that for another day. But before I speak on it, or if I do at all, I'd love to bring you in, Todd. Stereo Williams, what are your ideas?
I think
We're
it's
on the same concept.
Well, first of all, I think I want to make sure that everybody always understands one fundamental truth. White people say nigga. Like,
Fact.
non-black people say nigga. Everybody says nigga. Like, we shouldn't have any delusions about that. It's not a question of who says it and who doesn't. It's a question of what are the consequences of saying it. And I have typically, I joke about it, a lot, like, hey, if white people want to say nigga, then 1 in 6 white men cart them off to prison. Make it even. Like,
Make it even.
Like, if you want the word, take some of the burden that came with the word. You haven't earned any of the burden.
White cracker. White cracker though. Or things like that.
Just all slurs aren't created equal. Cracker has never caused white people as much pain as niggas cause black people. They never.
That's
will.
true.
It's a facile analogy. Like, it's like saying, when you call me a duty head, like, okay, yeah, calling somebody a duty head isn't the nicest thing to say.
Yeah, but everybody's narrative speaks differently to them, though. You know what I mean? So I don't know if you can. Do you think that they would understand that word has?
I think they don't understand that, and that's why we don't have a problem.
That's interesting because
There are some
it's a
people that will
narrative.
get offended if you call them a cracker.
No,
because that means that you're a closed-minded individual who likes to oppress people. And some people take offense to that.
But I think that beyond, you can get beat down for calling anybody a slur.
Right.
In case you weren't aware.
Right.
In case you weren't aware.
You start slinging slurs
YouTube.com.
In case you weren't aware.
That's on you. So whatever happens,
Be ready. Be prepared. Be prepared.
But what I'm saying is, when you talk in the broader context, broader than just that personal
Gotcha.
offensiveness of something, when you talk about sort of a cultural standard, cracker has never been what nigger is as a cultural standard.
Because it puts them in a dominant position.
Yeah, I mean, they were already there. Like, we were never in a position to make a cracker a nigga.
Very.
Oh, nope. That is until we took power of it.
Well, right.
Of the N-word?
We took power of the N-word
Okay.
and said, you can't say that,
The thing is,
or we'll physically harm you.
the thing is,
White people didn't have that same chance.
in allowing them to say the word. Well, my belief has always been that black people exist in, double conscious. We exist in sort of like
Double conscious, W. Du Bois.
we always have to make concessions for our blackness. We always have to accept that, not accept, but you always have to navigate the reality of your blackness, right?
Yeah.
So like if you're in a certain setting, you might not talk the way you would talk around a bunch of black people. You might not speak. We're always asked to not speak as freely. We're always expected not to speak as freely, to not behave as freely when we're in certain settings, right? You'll forgive me if I don't weep, because white people have to experience a sliver of that when it comes to the N-word. Because basically that's all that is. We're always told when we can't say this and we can't do that. This is the one time where we can tell white people, you can't do that around us. And so, as it might sound petty, but I think it's necessary just because whiteness has allowed for a certain colonial mindset. You can occupy any space. Oh, you say nigga? Why can't I say nigga? Like, I have friends that are Greek, Greek in Greek fraternities, and I can't do that. and I'm not gonna do that. And I'm not gonna say, why can't I do that? Because I'm not agreeing. End of fucking conversation. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't have to browbeat you about it. I understand that I'm not. Okay, cool. I'm not in a position to challenge you because I'm not what you are. You know what I'm saying? And we do that all the time. Same thing. We brought up the word bitch. When there's also camaraderie, and because I know black guys who have white friends who do say nigga, and they say, I don't care. That's your choice to make.
But
Now,
in all fairness, the Greek fraternities don't necessarily advertise their
they
bond.
They wear their colors. They step in front of one of the first things you learn at a HBCU. Don't break that line. They're stepping right there in front of you, and people that don't know will see that and want to join in. You know, and you have to go, wait, you don't do that. And so some people will get ignorant and want to buck about it.
But I think in hip hop, if you say no, don't do that, that is less record sales equals less money.
Well, no. What
That's
else?
what David Banner says. But let me ask you this though. So let's bring it back in with both of you, your creativity, with your art, the way that you see the world, your paradigm, and everything else. You know, like sort of like how does that come into your depiction? And you're a writer, and you also play the guitar. I've known you forever. You sing. You do a lot of different things. How does that come into like your writing? All the things that you're seeing, the things that are like very important now, whether we're dealing with, you know, sort of like power, men, allegations, sexual misconduct, all these different things. You know, like when you're writing something, when you're creating something, do you try to keep your bias out of it? Do you try to keep your bias, the way that you're seeing things, the language that you're using, do you try to keep that out of your creativity? Because writing is creative as well. How do you sort of like balance that? That would be like my question to both of you. And Todd, we could talk to you first about that.
I think that it's a fool's errand to believe you can remove bias from anything creative, because it's coming through you. It's filtered by you. I'm from the South, and growing up in the South and loving hip hop in the era that I loved hip hop, I watched as New Yorkers spat on us basically and said, that ain't hip hop. Y'all just sound like country bammers. That ain't, you know, that ain't real hip hop. And they said it for a long time.
Yes.
And because I bear those scars, when I write about the dominance of Southern hip hop in the 2000s, or the dearth of hip hop coming out of New York now, I'm going to write about it from the perspective of someone who grew up in the South and watched us get spit on. I'm not going to write about it from the perspective of a guy who grew up in New York and, you know, saw the graffiti and the breakdancing and all that. I use that example because that's my world. That's what I write about. And I don't apologize for that. I don't apologize for that bias because I think that voice is necessary.
Shout out to Uncle Luke.
Right, shout out to Uncle Luke. I think that voice is necessary. It's not necessarily about objectivity. Is a lie for when we get down to it. You can't be totally objective. It's just impossible. Your lens is who you are. You can be reasonable. You can be thoughtful in how you examine things, but your lens is your lens. I'm a black man in America, and I'm going to see things the way a black man in America, you know, from that vantage point. It doesn't necessarily mean I put blinders up, but that's my vantage point, and you don't have to apologize for that. So I say all that to say, in my writing, my perspective is why I write. So I'm not trying to present some sort of false idea of being objective. I'm just trying to present a reasoned, thoughtful argument for what makes sense to me. And I'm not going to cling to an argument just because I had it yesterday. I'm always checking myself, you know. It's not about being arrogant and letting your ego tell you, no, I'm right because I thought this yesterday and I can't change my mind. You can still change your mind, but be honest about the fact that this is my lens. I write about a lot of rock groups, and some people have not voiced criticism, but there's some awkwardness sometimes because of that. Because being a very topical, I talk about a lot of race issues, I talk about a lot of black music, and then you'll see me write about Elvis Presley or something, and people might think it's like, well, what's up with that?
Well, okay, Elvis Presley, you contradict the idea that he was racist. And
well, yeah, but even just talking about him sometimes, a lot of people will just kind of shut that door and they go, "What?"
Because they don't understand diversity.
Right, it's like the hell with it, you know. And so if I talk about Elvis, a lot of people say things, or the Beatles or the Stones or whoever. A lot of people will say things like, "Well, there's been 50 years of people writing about them," and I'll say, "Yeah, most of those people are white though." Most of those people are white men who grew up on that music. I'm a black man who didn't grow up on that music, and I think my perspective on that music matters as much as theirs, especially now when I'm more centered than I would have been 40, than my counterpart would have been 40 years ago. I think that matters. So to answer your question, I know that was long-winded. To answer your question, I don't try to remove the bias. I try to be thoughtful, but I don't try to remove the bias.
I think that speaks from your character. Your character plays a major role in the reason why you choose that perspective to go forward on. Phil?
No, I agree. When I write, I'm gonna be completely honest. Because the mode of operation of hip hop right now is there's no filter. It's like the Wild West. We could talk about not only selling drugs, we could glorify taking drugs. Not only am I going to talk about being in love, I'm also going to talk about slapping a girl or pimping a girl out or throwing money on her when she's shaking her butt in front of me.
That's old school. That's a.MJG.
It was like
that's too short. That's been around. Though,
We're reaping. These kids grew up on, like you're talking to people now. You're seeing a generation that grew up. Like you're talking to a generation that grew up on Gucci Mane. You know what I'm saying? Like he's an elder to them, and Gucci Mane grew up on 8 Ball and MJG and GK. So like a lot of this stuff is just the latest manifestation of a thing that's been.
I'm going to interrupt you, but I'm like,
no, that was my whole point.
When you were saying that, I'm thinking like the historical. Like I'm thinking about Ice-T.
Because I'm saying it now. Exactly my point. Because then it was controversial. It was, let's put a parental advisory on it. Let's have politicians say that we ban this. To now, we see on TV, hip hop culture across all races, whether it's in clothing, whether it's in what the athletes are listening to, whether it's commercials where they trying to sell whatever and they're bringing back MC Hammer songs, Salt and Pepper songs in Tide commercials now. So it's hip hop is very relevant and present in our society today, but one of the bad things or less positive things that came along with it, pimping and hoeing, calling each other's bitches and niggas to where it's now.
How does that affect
I'm gonna be completely honest. Sometimes I feel like I have to address my brothers and sisters as niggas and bitches to get them to listen.
Do you feel like?
Ooh, that's a conversation.
Do you feel like because you felt like that, you've inherited doing it, so now it became natural for you?
No, because I'm in control of my speech. I'm in control of what comes out of me.
So whenever that point happened where you felt like you needed to use these terms to address the people to get their attention, do you feel like did you ever notice a difference in your?
Oh yeah, I noticed the difference in the response when I'm giving a talk to my younger cousins in Chicago after a funeral, and I'm talking to them about death and about life and about taking care. But to really get their attention, I gotta say things like, hey, don't worry about your niggas. Worry about your money. Worry about your education. Make sure you're reading. Make sure you're focused on your career. But in the midst of all this positivity, I had to grab them with something that they can identify with, because they are not used to being called young brother or young man or young sister. They're used to being, hey, shawty, this is what you need to do.
You know what's crazy? So, that's a conversation. And so I'm going to say this real quick. And I remember when I told you about it, you criticized me. It's a really interesting conversation. But I had 2 girls one time. They were 14. They were my students. And they
I think that you can recognize the awkwardness of maybe your attempt to use Tupac to illustrate whatever the girls are trying to discuss. We can acknowledge the awkwardness in that without
trying to identify.
Well, without completely throwing out the idea that there are cultural signifiers, like that we don't connect with each other on a cultural level. You see 2 Italian guys and they go Paisan. It's not like, oh my God, how does he know that Italian guy is okay with him? You know, like that's their community, the way that they communicate.
Right.
And black people, we do that too. I think a lot of this gets filtered through these ideas about hip hop being inherently negative and things that are ghetto and not ghetto. Whereas if someone says, "Hey, what's up, Shawty? Little Shawty, how you doing?" To me, I don't hear ghetto. I just hear where I'm from. You know what I'm saying? Like I just hear where I'm from. It's because someone else told us that this is not good. But if two white guys from Texas say howdy, partner, it's just what they do. You know what I mean?
That way too well.
Right here. But you know, it's something. So much of who we are has been branded negative, and we internalize it, and we project it out, and we don't even recognize it sometimes. It's like, why do I feel like I have to apologize for talking for talking a certain way, except for the fact that somebody taught me that I shouldn't be that.
So I would just like to really regret the idea that we have to come to an end, but
all good things do come to an end.
yeah, but but we'll pick it back up at another time. Just like birth, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's a journey.
It's all
So-
journey.
so-
It's like
so-
letting go. You might.
We gotta let go.
Exactly. So when
We gotta
come
let
back,
go.
would like to personally thank Todd Stereo Williams, music critic, cultural commentator, and commentator for the
Daily Beast.
Daily Beast. You cut that part a little more out, right? and commentator for the Daily Beast. We'd also like to thank CEO of 180 Entertainment, King Felipe, musician, artist, and so forth. You are truly, I think, added some great ideas and thoughts behind not only music, conceptions, language, and so I would truly
Knowledge, awareness.
truly say thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you both.
Thanks,
This is
Adam.
this is a great platform, and can't wait to continue this conversation
We're
in the
coming
future.
back. We're coming back.
So this is a segment where we go into what we like to call the creative corner, and generally we used to call it the book of the week, but now we want to add more of a dynamic to it, where you can bring anything to the table, whether it's an idea, a phrase, a statement, a quote, or anything that you want to bring or suggest to the people. So who wants to go first? Who has something?
Feel free.
Okay, I'll go first. My book recommendation is the autobiography of Malcolm X by Alex Haley. It was one of the first books that I read from start to finish, and it actually inspired me to be a better writer, and a better reader, and a better person to my society. So it's a story about struggle. It's a story about success and spiritual enlightenment, and I suggest that everybody go check it out.
My pick is actually an album. This December is the 50th anniversary of the death of Otis Redding. Being a Georgia boy, middle Georgia boy, Otis Redding looms large. I think that for a lot of younger people, it may be hard to understand just how much he meant to black music, and how we suffered for him dying mid-career. We'll never know where he was about to go, but we know what he did, and I'm recommending complete and unbelievable Otis Redding's Dictionary of Soul. It's one of the greatest soul albums ever made. If you've never listened to Otis Redding, start there. Figure out why he still matters 50 years later. He's an important figure in the emergence of the singer-songwriter in black music. 4 years before Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, before Stevie Wonder's classic 70s period, Otis Redding was writing his own music and stuff, introspective things like Dock of the Bay, and I'm just a really big fan, and I think that his music still matters, and I think that I would love to see younger people get hip to Otis in the same way that they may be hip to some of his more celebrated peers like Marvin and Stevie.
Inspiration of mine. Lovely Day,
Oh yeah.
and Grandma Hands. Check those songs out by Otis Redding.
So
You had your turn.
once again, it's been a great pleasure.
Much love,
Great
man.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Felipe,
Thank you.
Stereo Williams. Thank you so
Stay
much.
tuned.
Season 2, Brown PaperBag series. Much love.
My man.
And